life doesn't begin when the crisis hits. Life actually begins after the crisis. What do you do when you still have to perform, but the operating system doesn't work? How do you handle the pressure? How do you regain clarity and composure? That's the central line through it all. Because people often assume I just got to get through it. No, once you get through it, it's a whole big array of situational things and relational things that happen. And so you have to figure out, how do I lead not only myself, but my team, the organization? Because it's high stakes, especially my lane is healthcare leadership. They have high stakes. That's high stakes because they are in the position to help heal another. And many healthcare leaders that I talk to don't take that responsibility well.
You ain't gotta finish first to get your first place prize. Don't need the front row just to let your light shine. The highest place of honors, serving at the lowest point. The power's in the voice, and you ain't gotta make no noise. They might say you finished last.
Welcome back to another edition of the Serving Second podcast, where we help second chair leaders create first place outcomes. I'm your host, Dr. Toussaint Williams, and if you've ever had to lead clearly while carrying pressure quietly, this conversation is just for you. Today's guest is Savio Clemente, a keynote and a TEDx speaker. He's a healthcare leadership strategist and the voice behind the human resolve, drawing from more than 2,000 interviews with global leaders and his own experience as a two-time cancer survivor. Savio developed the Adaptive Resilience Leadership Framework. This framework is to help leaders reduce cognitive overload, make clear, high-stakes decisions, and sustain performance when it matters most. If you've ever wondered how to lead well while the adrenaline wears off, but the expectations still remain, I want you to stay with us. Savio, just want to say welcome to the Serving Second podcast. Thank you for joining us and just looking at your journey. I'm just so excited to have an opportunity to dive in and kind of glean from you some of your experiences. But for people who are meeting you for the first time, what drew you to the work of helping leaders regain clarity after disruption?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Toussaint. I really appreciate it. The basic answer is my lived experience allowed me to follow that path. And unfortunately, it was due to a cancer and a cancer relapse 10 years apart. And so for me, the crux of it all is that what is a leader, really, if you think about it? A leader doesn't have to just be someone from a corporation. A leader is someone that people want to emulate, someone want to follow. They actually see qualities in them that they themselves want to embody. And so for me, my lived experience really allowed me to figure out for myself, well, based upon all the trauma and drama that I've been through, how can I adequately help serve other leaders in their respective fields, take what's happened, whether it's disruption or adversity, and gain the clarity and the composure to do so. And fortunately for me, I'm a journalist. At this point, I've interviewed over 2,000 leaders, change makers. And so for me, I've seen the through lines and the gaps in that process in general.
So I want to jump into, I know you mentioned the health crisis. I want to get that a little bit, but tell me before that, you mentioned 2,000 people you've interviewed. What was the catalyst to get you started in, I'm going to go talk to some folks today. What was that, the idea of the research?
Yeah, I think a lot of us look to our peers and look to media and look to leaders for ways to be and do. But I think in a world of disruption, and there's a lot of disruption now, there's social disruption, there's political disruption, there's technological disruption with AI. There's so much going on that I think now people are coming into their own where they figure out for themselves, I need to actually go further within to lead from within and then go out, rather than looking at these people and putting them on pedestals, which, and I'm not going to drop any names, a lot of people have disappointed us within the last couple of years, like majorly disappointed in all areas, political, even social, even music. And I think it's important to figure out, where do you um, like reside? What are your values? What do you want your legacy to be? Not in a very sort of searing way, but more in a everyday practical way. And so that was the germination of that. Fortunately, I do have access to a couple of really big heavy hitters like Vanessa Williams, who I interviewed, and it was interesting because she was launching a wellness product, and I was asking questions about performance. Because for me, the premise in what I do is really about, well, when you survive the crisis, the real challenge is after the crisis. It's not before the crisis. And that old operating system of ours and that performance is still required. But then the phase that I study is, well, then how do you go about working after that? And so for me, when I interviewed her, she was just, very focused because she's really good at that. And she was very prepped in stating what she stated. But out of all these interviews, I would say the major through line, or the gold, I would say, is the fact that leaders often have to put an armor around themselves, because they have to show that they are in control. Show, because if people don't believe in them, or don't look at them as someone who they can sort of expect things from, then they themselves fall short. So I think really the key there is to really fall into authenticity and to really have the courage to do that. And my lived experience forced me to do that. So I can't shy away from that.
So just thinking about that, and I appreciate you bringing this out, you're talking about your lived experience. You've identified that you've had cancer not once, but twice. And that is a huge disruption. I can only imagine the journey, but what did you learn about yourself and leadership during that time? And I guess if you don't mind, just kind of taking us through, I mean, you're a young guy, you learned that you have cancer. What was that process first? And how did you emotionally process it? And then what did you learn from it?
Sure. So let me take you back. So it was 2014. At that point in my life, I was just one of those people that really took as better care as I possibly could for myself. So I ate the right foods. I exercised 6 days a week. I did boxing. I did spinning. I did strength training. I took vitamins. And I used to see a naturopath who used to examine my blood work. And from the blood work, he would give me diet structures and vitamins to take. And he had actually a couple of celebrity clients as well. So I trusted him.
You've gone through the wellness. You were taking care of your body. And you find out what?
Yeah, so I was on a trip with a friend to Paris, London, and Amsterdam. I was noticing I was having drenching night sweats when I was there, and I'm like, that's strange. I came back, started having drenching night sweats, and all of a sudden my breathing started becoming belabored, and my stomach started getting distended, getting bigger. And so I saw the naturopath, and he's like, oh, this could be a few things. I think you need to go into mainstream medicine and see what this is. Get a sonogram. And I'm like, sonogram? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Go to the sonogram office. They take about an hour and a half, and they come out and they basically say to me, you need to go to the hospital. You need to have a relative come pick you up. I'm like, I just drove here. They're like, nope, have a relative come pick you up. So I go to the hospital, and literally they admit me within an hour. And I find out the next day it was stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was a blood cancer. I was bedridden for about 8 days because of the distended stomach. I had ascites, and then inside the ascites was a lymphoma. So they had to distill about 8 liters of fluid from my abdomen. And so I was in the hospital for an additional 7 days. And then 2 days before I left, the medical director came because they knew about my health history. They knew I didn't even take aspirin. And they said, you really need to start your first round of chemo. It's called R-CHOP. It's really effective, but that's what you need to do. And I had to dig within to figure out what that was. And we can actually talk about the second half of that situation, which was a decade later.
So 10 years later, you find out that it came back?
Yeah. So I would see my oncologist yearly after 2014. After 5 years, they tell you that it's less likely to come back. And the staff said, we really like seeing you, but we don't really want to see you if we don't have to. And I'm like, can I just come every year just for my own sanity? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I went in every year for 10 years. At that point, my oncologist who I had in 2014 retired. So I had a new oncologist. And he said everything was good in 2024. So that was June of 2024. That was only a year and a half ago. But I said to him, I said, and once again, I came back from another trip. This time I went to India for a media trip, and I went to go visit 8 cities. And it wasn't trip related, but I noticed that some of the things happening to me was intermittent ear fullness, and then really like a clogged nose on the right-hand side. And in 2014, I asked the oncologist, I said, if it ever came back, where would it come back? They're like, well, lymphoma has a tendency to come back in the same spot. So it would most likely come back in your stomach. I'm like, okay. So I told my oncologist, I'm like, I'm just going to go see my ENT because I have this. He's like, okay, that's fine. He's like, you're good here. He's like, I'll see you in a year. He's like, just have them send over some of the medical files, put you in your records, and you're good to go. I'm like, okay. So I go and see an ENT in New York City. And he looks at my right nostril and he's like, there's a lot of inflammation there. He goes, you are a B-cell lymphoma survivor, right? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, do you know B cells can live in the nasal cavity? I'm like, what? I thought he was going to give me, I went there for nasal like congestion medication. I didn't think that was the conversation. And he said, and I'll always remember this. He says, I've been burned as a doctor before. So let's be on the safe side and let's do an MRI. So he did an MRI and then he looked at the results. He's like, yeah, it's a little strange. He said, let's do a biopsy. And I ended up getting the biopsy on a Friday at 3 p.m. And it was, in fact, a relapse of lymphoma. And the next day was supposed to be my 25th college reunion. And I was in conversations with people via email for weeks before, wanting to see them. And I just couldn't muster the strength or the stamina to pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't, when I just found out about a relapse after being cancer-free for a decade.
So, man, that's major as you're talking about this. And I just want to affirm you for being able to, push past and being resilient through that whole process. You find out that you have cancer again after 10 years later. And, I want you to kind of speak to the person that's dealing with something right now, may have gotten some negative news dealing with that. How do you process that and still find purpose? How do you navigate that and still, because like you mentioned, you still have regular things that you have to do in that time period, in that process.
Yeah. So when I found out about the relapse, of course, they have to do tests. They have to make sure that that is the case. This new oncologist was even more superb than the other one. I didn't think he could be, but he was. He was actually off that day on Friday, but I called his office and his staff actually had him call me. And so he called me and he's like, come see me on Monday, let's see. And he had me email the scans, the results from the test that they did. And he basically took an hour and a half in his office on a big sheet of paper and wrote down what was involved. And it was so comprehensive with a relapse of lymphoma. It's not a joke. It involves 2-3 day stays in the hospital. It involves getting a neck catheter in order to harvest the stem cells. It includes injecting yourself for a week or two with stimulants in order to stimulate the bone marrow and the stem cells. Stay in a chair for about 6 to 7 hours. Sometimes it's over multiple days. Fortunately for me, it was only 1 day. Then it was 29 days in the hospital. Usually, typically, it's 21 days in order to get back your stem cells. So I had my own stem cells injected in me, not others. So then during those 29 days, I lost 26 pounds. One day, I was experiencing tachycardia basically every day. And when I would stand up, my heart rate would go up to 170. And so they had to rush me to ICU and they had to give me norepinephrine. Fortunately, I left. I did scans after I left 29 days in the hospital, and I was told I was in CR, which is called complete response or complete remission. I don't use the remission anymore, Toussaint, as you can imagine why. And then my oncologist said to me, there's a clinical trial. It's think of it like a insurance policy, a safety net that you could do. I asked my sister for her advice, and she's like, why would you waste like 4 or 5 months of doing an immunotherapy when you just got a cancer-free diagnosis now? I'm like, because if I don't do the full protocol or do everything in its arsenal, if it ever came back, I would have that doubt and I would have that regret, and I don't live by regrets. And so I did that, and then I did about 5 months of physical therapy. So to answer your question, I tell that story because people assume, and rightly so, I wrote a best-selling book where I interviewed 200 cancer survivors. This was before my relapse. And everyone wanted to talk about the fact that having cancer is not a death sentence, but having a relapse can be, unfortunately, especially a blood cancer, because if I didn't listen to my body, it could have traveled to my eyes. It could have been blind. It could have traveled to my brain. I could have had brain issues. So fortunately, I did listen to my body. So the key there is listen to your body. Don't be afraid to really face reality. I know it's scary. I know death you feel is looming. But in the moment, a scan is just a picture, or blood work is just a picture of what's happening right now. It's not the overall picture. It's just what they need as a barometer to figure out next steps. I would say try to do a deep dive into what's important for you, because in this moment, you're still alive, you're still breathing. I would say gain as much knowledge as to the cancer and the way it works, and people who have faced it and people who have overcome it, so that you know what the pitfalls are. Fortunately, we live in a world of AI, and I'm not saying AI should replace a doctor. Absolutely not. You need the care, but AI can give you reference points. And so what I was doing in the hospitals, when they would check my vitals every 4 hours, if something was high, I would go in and I would feed some of the results to my AI, and I would have a conversation when they came to do their rounds every morning. I would work in tandem with them. And I think that's important. I think now people are being empowered to take their health seriously, because there was a point in time where people would give all their power to the doctor. And I'm not saying that they don't deserve it. They do deserve it. They've studied, they know it, they've lived it, they understand how to treat. But healing is not linear. Healing is a combination of steps, left, right, up, and above. And you need to work in tandem and harmony with your care team so that you can get the best possible outcome. So those are the initial things I would say to someone who just got a diagnosis of cancer.
So I think, and what I'm pulling out, even for those who haven't had a challenging diagnosis as cancer, but there's a level of, when you participate in your healing process, when you're activating, hey, what can I do? Not what is the worst thing that's happening. It almost changed, what I'm hearing, it almost changed the focus. And because you're participating, now you have a little bit more vested interest than somebody who has an external component that's going to help you. Is that kind of where I feel like you're moving on?
100%. Because if you don't figure out ways, and my life and my background served me well with this relapse, because I'm a board certified wellness coach. So I live that lifestyle. I'm a journalist, so I've interviewed people who have had cancer. I've interviewed leaders. I've interviewed different people. So I'm someone who can glean information and synthesize it. I'm a keynote speaker. I speak about this, and I speak about leadership, because leadership starts from the person. It doesn't always start from the team. It starts from who you are, because those are the ways that people can emulate and can be. And so the first step you have to do is find some way to self-regulate, whether that is prayer, whether that's meditation, whether that's journaling, whether that's taking a walk, whether that's breathing exercises. There's so many tools and so many ways that we could self-regulate nowadays. And if you can't do those things, then you can rely on some of the wellness tools and devices out there. That's number one.
No, I got it. So I'm because I'm trying to be as practical as possible. We got to, first of all, start up when you identify something that's negatively or that's challenging, what we identify as a disruption. First thing we want to do is, how can I participate? And then how can I self-regulate? Whether it be prayer, whether it be meditation, whether it be some type of journaling where I can kind of focus my attention on those positive areas, because disruptions happen.
Beautiful summary.
Now, Savio, let me ask you this question, because you mentioned, you're a keynote speaker. What is the keynote that you enjoy giving? The one that you say, hey, when I get booked for this, I'm really enjoying, I'm going to hit this one out the park.
Yeah, it's that life doesn't begin when the crisis hits. Life actually begins after the crisis. What do you do when you still have to perform, but the operating system doesn't work? How do you handle the pressure? How do you regain clarity and composure? That's the central line through it all. Because people often assume I just got to get through it. No, once you get through it, it's a whole big array of situational things and relational things that happen. And so you have to figure out, how do I lead not only myself, but my team, the organization? Because it's high stakes, especially my lane is healthcare leadership. They have high stakes. If you're a fan of the show, The Pit, it still gives me a nervous system anxiety, to be honest with you, but I love it. It's on tonight, so I'm going to watch it. That's high stakes because they are in the position to help heal another. And many healthcare leaders that I talk to don't take that responsibility lightly.
Man, I want to push you a little bit further when you're talking about your keynote. Getting through is the first step. Like, that is so almost foreign because most people say, "Hey, I'm just getting through it. I just got to get to the other side," and not realizing the other side as another set of problems or challenges, all in that set of yourself. How in your keynote or how in your presentations do you help guide somebody through?
Absolutely. So we talked about one of the things, which is self-regulation. Another one that's really big is this idea of psychological distancing, putting distance between you and the problem. So I don't want to get in trouble with any psychologists out there or psychiatrists out there. I'm not talking about detachment and I'm not talking about disassociation. I'm talking about psychological distancing. It's an actual term. So that's definitely something that one can strive to do. Another thing, this is from my lived experience, 29 days in the hospital in a quarantine room. Why a quarantine room? Because when you get a stem cell transplant, they have to make sure they stave off any infections. So what did I have at my disposal, Toussaint, that was free and accessible to me? What do you think it was?
Man, my thing is pen and piece of paper, or just your mind, be able to kind of process that.
Silence and stillness. They're
Wow.
free. They were available to me anytime, anywhere. And when I have two sisters, so when my other sister in California asked me, "How'd you get through that? What'd you do?" All I told her was I slept, because most people don't understand what silence and stillness really is until you're forced, until your physical body is forced, until you're so tired, whether you're nauseous. For me, it was, having diarrhea situations and just taking all those meds and all that. I was lethargic. I just didn't have the energy, but I had silence and stillness. And in that, you get to actually realize for yourself, oh, I'm much greater than this person that's lying here. Because at least for me, my spirit was still alive. My mind was still active. I wasn't working. I made a conscious choice to stop everything. Once you have a relapse, and I don't want to scare anybody, you have to put 100% of your focus on it, because cancer hits you like a vengeance, especially blood cancer, because it can travel anywhere. It's not an organ cancer. And so I knew I had to give 100% of my effort and time and focus, like a laser beam. I had to focus directly on it. And in that silence and stillness, I also discovered, because I'm a curious person, things in my training. So we were taught very early on that intellect was like the number one thing to have. Then we were taught, no. Emotional intelligence is the thing we need to have. But now science and all the research points to it's metacognition. It's the thinking of the thinking. So in my lived experience, I got to actually physically embody that. What does that actually mean? What do I do with this? And then the fourth thing is this idea. Everyone knows about resilience, right? Bounce back, push through, come on, crisis hits, push through. And I'm not saying of course we need to do that. We're humans. We want to get through. We want to get through something. We want to be on the other side. But I, in my keynotes, like to talk about adaptive resilience. When you're in when you're in that, how do you remain flexible? How do you remain open? How do you remain alive with strategies and things that you can do to help lift yourself up from it? And so for me, it was a learning experience, because when I left the hospital, that was the crisis, right? The cancer. Recovery was much more difficult, because I had to then live as this person who went through, when my physical body went through the trauma, and my emotional center was rocked, and my psychological center was rocked, and my spiritual core. I tell people that experience was like a spiritual exile for me. 100%. No matter what your belief system is. I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy in Catholic elementary school. In college, I explored various belief systems, from Buddhism to Vedic philosophy. And so for me, I have a wide swath of of understanding, because I'm, like I said, I'm just curious in general. But that was 100% hands down a spiritual exile for sure.
It's challenging because for many of us, and I'm just kind of, as you're talking, I love these interviews because I have opportunity to kind of grow and lean in myself. I'm taking notes or, trying to make some adjustments. But one of the things that I have a difficult time with is slowing down. And, one of the things that, my favorite, Bible text is, Psalms 46:10 that says, be still and know that I am God.
Yes.
And, honestly, I hate it, because I hate, like slowing down, and you're in this age where everything has a computer or iPad, something to kind of keep you moving. But in this situation, in this disruption, it kind of pushes you out of all of those normative activities. And you're forced to just kind of like the thinking about thinking. That for me is just like, it's hard, but I think looking at you and listening to you, that's what kind of helps you get peace through the physical component of the malady, the challenge, the diagnosis. What do you say to somebody who doesn't like to slow down?
I would book note what you just said, which is this idea of find the peace or the silence within, and there God is, right? And so I would say with that is to know thyself is to heal thyself. If you're always moving forward, whatever speed you're going at, how are you ever going to come back to self again? And this is something that I speak to in my TEDx talk. So I did a TEDx talk about maybe like a year and a half before the relapse. And in it, it's titled 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And people say, wait, inner stranger? What are you talking about? And they're like, what do you mean? They're like, can you explain what that means to you? And I'm like, yeah, the inner stranger for me was that young adult who never felt rooted. I always felt like a wanderer. Like I just never felt in any environment or any situation, I was completely grounded. I was present, not fully maybe, but I just didn't feel that way. And then the person was like, oh, actually, I think my inner stranger is that female professional or that mother or that sibling that I just can't seem to rise to. I can't be that great mother or that great sibling or that great executive. And so in the talk, I talk about an acronym. And as we all know, there's a Hawaiian word called aloha, and aloha means hello. And so it's hello to your inner self. And so the A in aloha means acknowledge. Acknowledge where you are, like don't pretend, like write it down, do a deep dive, do a brain dump, whatever you need to do, just get it out of your system onto paper or onto a digital screen. So at least you can acknowledge what is actually happening. Don't pretend, because people will try to do that, especially a medical situation. They're like, oh, no, you'll be good. Like I had people saying to me, oh, you're a fighter. You've always been, you'll be okay. They don't know. Of course, I don't know. And I'm not saying what they're saying is not comforting. It's comforting. You don't want to hear someone saying negative things to you, obviously, but just acknowledge what's happening. L stands for listening. So listen to your inner self. So in Hawaiian modalities in healing, they have something called huna healing. And in huna healing, one of the basic tenets is speaking to the different body parts. I call it the three brains: head, heart, and gut. And they actually believe speaking to it because it gives off a sensation, a vibration, an energy, of a feeling of something. I'm not saying doing it in front of people. They're going to think you're strange, but that's what they believe. And so listen to your inner self, whatever that is. O stands for opening. So open yourself up to this, no matter what your belief system is. It's not like you're exploring things that is considered dangerous. You're exploring yourself and your thought processes and your life, and you're looking back. And so just be open to that. H stands for harnessing. So harness all that information, try to make the connections, try to see actually what works and what doesn't work. If you're someone who it's a lot of information, feed it into AI, let AI help you make sense of it, whatever you need to do. And then A is acting, but it's with a caveat. It's acting with courage. So don't be afraid to move forward with those. And so that's what I call the Aloha Reboot, which is part of my adaptive resilience leadership framework that I speak on keynotes with.
Man, I love your ability to make those things just so simple. Aloha, we've all heard it, but to really be able to reboot and identify how we can grow and develop and heal from some of those challenging processes. A couple of things. Well, this is one of the questions I want to share with you. After interviewing thousands of leaders in studying resilience, What separates leaders who merely endure adversity from those who turn it into a long-term advantage?
I would say it's a level of humbleness.
Mm.
Yeah. If I would have to distill everything that they have told me, a large portion of what they speak is performance based. So I'll give you an example. So um, it's really interesting because life can give you great roses, but it can give you thorns in an instant.
Yes.
So I just explained to you that I did a TEDx talk. Then after the TEDx talk, I did a media visit to India, 8 cities. I was gone for about a month. And then I came back, and my editor, as a journalist, I cover leadership, I cover wellness, I cover healthcare, obviously. But this was something that was completely different than one of my beats. And he said, Savio, I have a great assignment. Would you like to go and cover the red carpet at the Oscars? And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. So I, of course, said yes. A good friend of mine was like, if you don't go, and they actually was also giving Marla Gibbs an award for all her work. And I was a huge fan of the Jeffersons and 227 as well.
Yes.
And so it was great to meet her. It was really wonderful as well. But I tell you this story because I if you know anything about me, I like these things are great to have, but I'm not someone who's filled with ego. Life has shown me that you have to be completely truthful as to the reality of what's happening, the highs and the lows. So I tell you this story because I was on the red carpet. I was with US Magazine, was literally right next to me. So most celebrities came by and I had, full access to them. And I realized something, Toussaint. They were still acting.
Wow.
On the red carpet with their beautiful gowns and beautiful tuxes and coiffed hair and beautiful, laminate makeup and all that. They were still acting. Why? They're acting for me as a journalist. They're acting for their handlers. They're acting for their managers. They were putting on a performance, and it's the coach brain in me. It's the keynote speaker in me. It's a journalist in me that sees past that lens. And I tell you because I didn't really feel a lot of humbleness in that room, in those places. I was grateful for experiencing it. I'm not saying anything negative about it. It's definitely a check mark thing in my box of things that I've accomplished in life. But I would say for the most part, people are showing you a version that they want you to believe rather than being humble as to how they live their true life.
Man, I think in processing what you're saying, and kind of sometimes you show up for things and we can unknowingly kind of put on that mask, but I'm hearing you say true healing comes when we are actually being our authentic selves, the person that we were created and designed to be. And in doing that, that's true healing can really begin. For the leader who's listening right now, I want you to speak to them, and they're carrying a lot of weight and they're doing it trying to act like everything's okay. What would you tell them to get them to a healthier place for a better tomorrow?
I would say first, figure out the signals and the patterns that are coming at you. Like they're coming at you for a reason, whether that's coming from within or in your team or your organization. Figure out exactly what's actually happening. Be completely authentic and transparent as to exactly showing the fact that you care and you're concerned. It's not off-putting. It actually allows people to align with you because they feel that you are part of their journey as well. You're just not someone dictating things to them. You're someone who actually wants them to flourish as well. And then the third major thing I would say is there's so many ways and so many access points we have nowadays in order to feel whole or to feel sort of alive and invigorated. I mean, for me, I've had many things during my healing recovery process. Toussaint, I tried everything you can think about healing, from traditional medical, I needed the medicines, to integrative modalities. I literally tried them all from ecstatic dance. I mean, like barefoot dancing to like, music by yourself, just dancing by yourself, to internal family systems where people showed me what the different parts of myself was. The only thing I didn't do is I didn't do psychedelics. And the reason why, and even though I interviewed a couple of people who are really the forefront people in that field, is because when you open any door in life, you have to be ready to face it. You have to be responsible to open it. And I just felt my body went through trauma, and I didn't need that. And it wasn't a part of my healing journey that I needed. And I'm telling you this for this last question, is because when you open a door or a conversation with anyone on your team, the way to get buy-in is to allow them to feel that you are part of that buy-in.
Man, I'm really appreciative of just you saying that. Healing comes when you help people, have people walk alongside with you. And that, going back to what you mentioned earlier, being humble and allowing folks to say, hey, I'm not all okay. I do have issues. I'm processing this trauma, but it's not going to stop me. I'm going to continue pushing forward. Savio, this has been a blessing. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, out of your week, and your many different talks and podcast interviews, just to kind of pour into those people who serve second, some people who sometimes serve in the background and carrying that weight. But you're saying, hey, listen, you don't have to carry it by yourself. When you walk with other people and be vulnerable and let people know, it makes all the difference in the world.
What did Erykah Badu once say? She said, girl, didn't someone tell you could leave those bags? It's that. Leave those bags, because if you think of it like a pot, if the pot's full, you can't pour anything in. You got to pour out the pot in order to put fresh waters in. Like Eastern philosophy teaches us, you can always go back to nature. The rocks and the river, they have their own purpose. And so when the river flows, even though there's rocks abutting it, it goes under, over, it goes around, but it knows its direction. Same thing with the seed. Do we check the seed to see if it's germinating? No. We just trust, and the seed trusts that it will germinate. And so really the key is, no matter what the pressure is, no matter what the clarity or non-clarity is, you can get to a better place.
And family, I love that. And this is a part of the journey that we take us on. We believe that our Creator has put us in a place to be a blessing to other people, that every source has a responsibility to be a resource for others. And Savio, before we leave, I just want to give you an opportunity to share how can people connect with you, and what are some resources you have where they can learn a little bit more about you and your journey?
Sure. So they can go to my website. So it's Savio P. Clemente, SavioP Clemente. On there, they can see my keynote work. They can see my TEDx talk. And also every Wednesday, I have a Substack newsletter called The Human Resolve, because resolve is all we have in this world of disruption. And in it, I talk about head, heart, and gut intelligence, and also my interviews and my lens and synthesis of that. And if they want to connect with me on social media, I'm at The Human Resolve. And I think I have a few more keynote spots. So if you're looking for anything with healthcare leadership or leadership in general, I'm your man.
Thank you. That is Savio Clemente. If you want to hear more about him, the information will be in the show notes. We are so glad, Savio, you stopped by and poured into the individuals here at Serving Second. We look forward to seeing the next TED Talk or the next keynote as we continue to work with you and connect with you moving forward. Family, this is the Serving Second podcast. We're so glad you dropped by and allowed us to just hang out with you. Thank you, Savio, again for being with us. This is where we're learning that creating first place outcomes from second place finishes. I want to thank you so much for joining us and look forward to connecting with you on week. Take care. And
okay, wonderful. Thank you.
What a powerful conversation. Savio reminded us that leadership after disruption requires more than endurance. It requires clarity, intentionality, and the courage to recalibrate before fatigue starts making decisions for us. If this episode helped you, I need you to help me out. Share it with another individual that you know that's serving in the second chair, who needs to make sure they're a part of a community. Make sure you're following the Serving Second podcast wherever you listen. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like, and leave a comment so more leaders can find this conversation and we can grow together. And remember, the mission that I serve is bigger than my title. I need you to keep leading well right where you are, and we'll see you next week. God bless.